This is the story of a man who rose from nothing, a man who bent the world's greatest republic to his will, who was loved by the people, feared by the elite, and envied by history itself. This is the story of how the most powerful man in Rome was stabbed to death by his own friends in the name of saving democracy. But in trying to save the republic, they buried it, and Rome, it would never be the same. This is the day democracy died, the assassination of Julius Caesar. He wasn't born into greatness, not into power, not into wealth, just into a name, Julius Caesar. And in Rome, sometimes that was enough. Caesar was born in 100 BC into the Julii family, one of the oldest patrician names in the Republic. But in reality, his family was poor. They had legacy, not influence. Status, not power. His youth was shaped by political chaos. Rome was on fire, civil war between the populist Marius and the conservative Sulla. Caesar's uncle was Marius himself. So when Sulla took control, Caesar became a target. He was barely 19 years old and already marked for death. He refused to renounce his family. He refused to bow, and he was forced into hiding. For years, he lived like a fugitive. His life spared only because powerful allies begged Sulla to show mercy. The young Caesar learned early. Rome was ruled not by law, but by force, fear, and favors. The ambition awakened Caesar joined the army and escaped to the east. He fought pirates, literally. He was captured once and demanded they double the ransom because he believed he was worth more. Then, once freed, he hunted them down and crucified them, as promised. When he returned to Rome, he entered politics. But unlike the old patricians, Caesar didn't rely on family or fortune. He relied on spectacle. He borrowed enormous sums from Marcus Crassus, Rome's wealthiest man. He threw grand games, massive festivals, and gave endless handouts to the public. He bought popularity, and it worked. The people adored him. The Senate resented him. But they couldn't stop him. He rose through the ranks with frightening speed. First as military tribune, then quaestor, then aedile, and finally Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief priest, at just 37 years old. Every step, carefully calculated. Caesar knew exactly where he was going, and no tradition, no senator, and no law would stop him. The deal that changed everything. By 60 BC, Rome was paralyzed by gridlock. The Senate had become a battlefield of egos. Reforms died before reaching a vote. The people were angry, veterans were ignored, and the Republic was cracking. That's when Caesar made a move that changed Roman history forever. He formed a secret alliance, the first triumvirate, with two rivals, Crassus, the banker, Pompey, the general. Together, they controlled everything, money, the army, and the streets. It was an illegal alliance, an invisible dictatorship. But it worked. Caesar was elected consul in 59 BC. In 1 year, he passed more legislation than anyone in a generation. He gave land to veterans, food to the poor, and favors to allies. And then he left. The Senate thought they'd be rid of him. They had no idea he was just getting started. The conquest of Gaul Caesar was granted proconsular command over Gaul, modern-day France and Belgium. It was meant to be a quiet post. Instead, he used it to become a god. From 58 to 50 BC, Caesar fought the Gallic Wars, brutal campaigns against dozens of tribes. He crossed rivers no Roman had crossed, built bridges in 10 days, besieged entire cities, killed over 1 million people, enslaved another 1 million, and he wrote every victory down. Commentari de Bello Gallico, the commentaries on the Gallic War, was part war report, part self-promotion. It made him a celebrity back home. He sent gold, slaves, and glory back to Rome. But more than that, he built something terrifying. A loyal army. They didn't fight for Rome. They fought for Caesar. Crossing the Rubicon back in Rome, things had changed. Crassus was dead. Pompey had turned. And the Senate, now terrified of Caesar's power, ordered him to give up his army and return as a private citizen. If he obeyed, He'd be arrested, tried, exiled. Maybe worse, but Caesar didn't hesitate. In 49 BC, he stood on the banks of the Rubicon River, the boundary of legal military command, and he crossed it. It was a declaration of war, not just against Pompey, but against the Republic itself. He marched south. Towns surrendered without a fight. Senators fled. Pompey escaped to Greece, and Caesar entered Rome, unopposed. The death of a republic. The civil war was brutal. Caesar crushed Pompey's forces at Pharsalus in 48 BC. He chased him to Egypt, where Pompey was assassinated by the young pharaoh. Caesar stayed, installed Cleopatra as queen, and fathered a child. Then he returned to Rome, not just as a victor, but as a king in all but name. The Senate named him Dictator for 10 years, then Dictator Perpetuo, Dictator for life. He filled the Senate with allies, passed reforms, forgave enemies, planned massive building projects. But he also wore purple robes, sat on a golden throne. And during a public ceremony, Mark Antony offered him a crown. He refused it 3 times. But the gesture was clear. Caesar was no longer just a man. He was becoming a monarch. And in Rome, kingship was a death sentence. The Senate called him a savior. The people called him a god. But behind the marble columns, in the corridors of the Curia, they were sharpening knives. Julius Caesar was not just powerful, he was unstoppable. And to the old aristocracy, that made him dangerous. The Roman Republic had stood for nearly 500 years, guided by checks, balances, and tradition. No man, not even the greatest general, could rule alone. But Caesar had done exactly that. He controlled the army, he controlled the treasury, he controlled the courts, the tribunes, and the Senate itself. To many Romans, it looked like monarchy, something they had sworn for centuries never to return to. The last king of Rome, Tarquin the Proud, had been overthrown with fire and fury. And now here was Caesar, wearing royal purple, stamping coins with his face, and sitting on a throne. Whispers turned to rumors turned to fear, and fear in Rome led to violence. The conspiracy wasn't born overnight. It grew in silence among the senators who had once supported Caesar, men who had fought beside him, praised him, and now watched as the Republic crumbled under his shadow. Leading them were 2 names: Cassius, a bitter man with a sharp tongue, and Brutus, the golden boy of Rome. Intelligent, idealistic, trusted by Caesar. Brutus was more than a friend. His mother, Servilia, had been Caesar's lover. Caesar had pardoned him, protected him, promoted him. But Brutus came from a bloodline that had once overthrown kings, and history, it seemed, was calling. At the Lupercalia festival, Mark Antony offered Caesar a golden crown. 3 times Caesar refused. 3 times the crowd roared. To the senators it was clear he would be king, sooner or later. That night, the conspirators gathered. They called themselves the Liberators. They told themselves it wasn't murder, it was saving Rome. They chose the Ides of March. They chose the Senate floor. Caesar, confident and unguarded, would walk straight into their trap. The gods screamed warnings. Lightning struck his statue. Priests saw omens. Calpurnia, his wife, dreamt of his death. And then the final whisper, "Beware the Ides of March." Said a stranger. Caesar smiled. "The Ides have come." And the man replied, "Aye, but not gone." It was the morning of March 15th, 44 BC. Caesar almost stayed home. Calpurnia, his wife, had dreamt of his death. The priests warned him. Even a stranger whispered, "Beware the Ides of March." But a trusted friend, Decimus, convinced him to go. Caesar entered the theater of Pompey just before noon. The Senate chamber was filled with familiar faces, men he trusted. They welcomed him warmly. Tullius Cimber stepped forward to plead for his brother's pardon. When Caesar declined, Cimber grabbed his toga. Then the first dagger struck. Casca stabbed him from behind. Others followed. Cassius, Decimus, Brutus, the man Caesar loved like a son. Caesar saw him and, in disbelief, whispered, "Et tu, Brute?" He stopped resisting. He pulled his toga over his face and collapsed at the feet of Pompey's statue, ironically the very man he had once defeated. 23 wounds. Only one was fatal. The rest was rage, symbolic, ritual. But what followed wasn't triumph. There were no cheers. The city fell silent. The conspirators had expected to be hailed as heroes. Instead, they were met with fear, confusion. The people wept. Some fled. Others rioted. Mark Antony, Caesar's ally, seized the moment. At the funeral, he held up Caesar's blood-soaked robe. He pointed to the stab marks. He named the assassins. The crowd exploded in fury. Fires spread. Mobs chased the killers. Brutus and Cassius fled the city. Within 2 years, both were dead, defeated at the Battle of Philippi. But something bigger had died that day, too: the Roman Republic. Caesar's death was meant to restore liberty. Instead, it unleashed chaos. His assassination opened the gates to civil war. In the power vacuum, Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, rose quickly. He was young, brilliant, and ruthless. Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra. He crushed every opposition. He kept the Senate, but made it meaningless. He never called himself king, but he ruled like one. As Augustus, he became Rome's first emperor. The Republic, built on centuries of civic pride and shared power, was gone. What remained was empire, enduring but hollowed. And yet, Caesar got what he wanted: immortality. His name became a title, Caesar. Later, it evolved into Kaiser, into Czar. His face was carved into marble, his legend taught in schools. But the cost? The end of democracy. The men who plunged their knives into Caesar believed they were saving Rome. In truth, they sealed its fate. On that fateful day, the Ides of March, Rome didn't just lose a man, it lost its republic. And the world would never be the same